All right, so welcome to CS Office Hours. Today's topic is CS as change agents. And we're doing this whole month of themed change management topics due to Keishla Caeasar-Jones. Thank you very much, Keishla. Yay. She was presenting.
I think you give me way too much credit, but thanks so much.
Well, you inspired it. So she was presenting at Propel, which is Rocket Lane Conference, on the topic. We got started talking about that. That's how we got into the whole topic. So let me share, because the other thing I'm trying to do while I talk and do these things at the same moment is, all right, so we have CS as change agents. And I want you to put into the chat now, how would you describe the role of a CSM? What phrases or words would you share? All right. So hopefully you're doing that. Overworked. Strategic advisor, change expert, strategic partner. Awesome. Okay, so that as you start working on that over in the chat, let's move over to the next slide. And Keishla, why don't you let us know what we're in for today?
Yeah, as Jen said, I did a little bit of foundational work around change management as it related to the onboarding process, which is Rocket Lane and Propel's focus. And while I don't particularly in my day-to-day work, I currently serve as a senior director for partner success over some CS teams. I don't handle onboarding particularly on my own. Obviously, change management and being a change agent is a huge part of the work that we do as CSs. And so if you were here last week, you got a chance to hear Jan kind of provide some high-level overview from Britt Andreatta's Wired to Resist around the emotional aspects of change. And I think that conversation was sort of linked me to some ideas that were running in my head about all the emotions. As a CS leader, our partners have emotions, my CS teams have emotions. And it got me thinking about that great Disney Pixar movie Inside Out, where we all have in our heads joy and disgust and sadness and fear and anger. And then we have our imaginary friends, Bing Bong, that keep us on the straight and narrow and help us sort of talk through the things that we're doing throughout our work. And so when we think about CSMs as change agents, as Jan said last week, we are going to scratch the surface in these conversations, but hopefully what we do is give you some ideas and some frameworks to take back to your work. Number one, thinking about your CSM and how you identify roles and expectations. Oftentimes as CSs, we can be fixers and helpers, and we're so busy fixing and helping that we forget to do the things to help our partners move along the spectrum of what they're doing with their implementations. We're going to talk a little bit at high level about leadership and the role of leadership in helping to provide some direction related to change management through the customer journey. And then we'll close out a little bit in thinking about the internal and external interactions that take place where we're working as change agents with our partners, our customers. In my role, we call our customers partners, and talk a little bit about what it's like to be a change agent internally within your organizations with marketing and sales and product. All of these skill sets come to play.
And was there anything that you saw over in the chat that you wanted to sort of note in connection to all of this? I think next slide.
Yeah, definitely. It's, we're all trying, we're functioning as subject matter experts. We're juggling many tasks. We're trying to drive value. And for many of us, we find ourselves sometimes in a push and pull situation. I think that's where you're going to go next. Yeah. Sometimes, Jan, I find myself as my CSM teams, you feel like you're pulling your partners along, or you're pushing them along, or you're coming up against roadblocks and obstacles. And maybe that comes to that very first comment. There's always that kid in the class that's going to say overworked. Thanks, Gary Hoffman. I taught high school. So the realities of all that overwork and how I think one of the challenges we always have to face is how can we figure out in CS, we're never want for activity. There are plenty of things to do. The goal is to make sure you're doing the right things at the right time. to have the greatest impact. And sometimes that might mean not doing that thing that you've decided for yourself that's super important. But if it's not going to drive the change that you want, maybe it's not the best thing to do. And I'm seeing these things, CSs as helpers are definitely a big part of that, or fixers.
Mhm.
Yeah. So as we're digging in, I wanted to sort of pick up on the third part of Britt Andreatta's book. And she, I think that Jan did a great job the last session on laying the foundation for the emotional aspects of change. And as a CS leader, I realized, having been in both the seat of a CS manager and a leader, sometimes when you're too close to the job, you're really hard to see the big picture. And I think it's really important for CS leaders to help our teams think about the change process.
Sorry. I was just trying to make it bigger. I'll work on making it bigger. You keep talking.
We're good. I was thinking the same thing. I was like, my eyeglasses were focusing in.
There.
And when we think about what Jan presented last week, she talked about the emotional valley of change, right? That we go from these, depending on the stakeholders that we're dealing with. Our partners might be the ones who chose us and they're really excited about the change that's going to happen with the adoption of this new product or service. They could be as Jan said last week, the champion of the previous product that was in place. There's all kinds of ranges of emotions that are going to take place in this process across the varying stakeholder groups. And what Britt Andreatta poses is that we take that emotional valley and turn the change journey into mountains, right? We want to go up and over the mountain instead of sinking down into these valleys. And to do that, it's all about moving from that current state to that new state of normal. But we have to be cognizant of core factors that are going to be there along that journey. We know that anytime we bring in new products or services, we're disrupting something, we're changing something. And so we can't be, we talked about this last week too, Jan, about being we're so jazzed and excited because they bought our thing and we're not recognizing all the different emotions that might be going on there. And we've got to match, that emotion for the disruption that might be taking place and really asking those questions.
Yeah. And I think, and I like too, though, and I think we might even, and it was exciting to have the first meeting of the book club yesterday, Marianne and Cynthia and different folks who are here today from that. But thanks so much for the two of you starting that. But and we might do Wired to Resist next, just because it's sort of what we're all excited about. But another part of it that I think is kind of interesting is the different types of change and engagement in the customer journey and how it connects with that. So I'd love for you to dig into that.
Yeah, so as CS leaders, Britt sort of lays out these 4 different types of change. One is that long, an intense trek. Some of you might be supporting really big enterprise solutions, and that process is going to take a while, and you're working through them. And she identifies that as sort of a red change journey. The next could be a really quick, steep uphill climb. One of the products that I support, the implementation takes a little bit of time. And we found that a lot of our partners, they would finish the implementation and thought they were done. And that was really just the beginning of their change journey. And so we had to really reframe how we talked about implementation and the milestone, and not making it feel like it was the finish when it was really closer to the start of the journey. Sometimes they're really long and, I'm using my little eyes here. I'm just going
to the long and steady trek.
Long and steady trek. I think you dialed in a little bit this as well last week, Jan, about the amount of repetition and use case that partners need with that. And sometimes I'm not using it as frequently, but it's going to take me a while for this change or this shift or adoption to take place. And then some change journeys, as much as we're excited about our product, they're just little pebbles in the road. And we need to acknowledge when that change is taking place in that particular way. And so I really challenge, and I'm challenging myself as a CS leader to take a step back, both with my customer journey and with the things that I'm trying to change internally around processes. Number one, recognize that I don't want to lay out a bunch of long and intense journeys all at once if I'm trying to make some changes. So I want to be thoughtful about the changes happening at a lot of different levels. So I want to be thoughtful about where I identify where those are happening internally, but also thinking about, as with my customers, where those processes lay out and how do I match my customer journey and find that alignment of what the customer journey is to the change journey as it relates to your product and your service, and what the customer success manager or team might have to be changing. One aspect that we're working on in my team is really upskilling. We have been on a change journey of really adding some expanded cross-sell and upsell to our work. And so that means I have to really equip my team with some different skill sets. And we're on a change journey of how to do that and do that better and more effectively. So I'd love to hear. Go ahead,
well,
Jen.
I was just going to say, and Tiara had just asked in the chat, kind of, well, what is a pebble on a trail? And I have actually a couple of examples that might help folks as you're thinking about this. If you were thinking about your onboarding process, let's say, just as a type of, it's a common type of change management that we have to help our customers through. When I was an individual contributor, we had a 30-day sort of onboarding process. It was really kind of closer to 45 days. And then it was followed by another quick turnaround of 15 days. You're going to get more content up. And then after that, it was just a 30-day, routine of what they did. So it was really like in that first 45 to 60 days, it was like how we would get folks, engage, through the onboarding, into their, rhythm. And through that, then we knew that they were going to adopt pretty successfully. Years ago, when I was looking for a different sort of leadership role, I, was talking to a founder and he was saying, oh, well, tell me about how you help your customers onboard. And I was just thinking in the context of, this 30, 45-day process, right? So I was talking him through that and he's like, whoa. If our customers haven't gotten onboarded in 20 minutes, we've done something wrong. Well, that's more like a pebble on the trail, right? Like if you have onboarding, when you think about when you onboard for an app where all you have to do is fill in your information and it's there, you're onboarded. You haven't adopted necessarily, right? But you've onboarded. So if you think about if you were going to compare various onboardings, right? There can be long and steady treks. There can be big projects that are intense and, huge. That would be like the upper left. You could have something that's pretty intense, but maybe, you're up and you're down and you're through it. That's maybe like a 30-day thing. Or you could have something that takes you 5, 10, maybe 20 minutes and you should be done. And so what is your customer journey like? What is your onboarding like? What is your customer journey like, right? If you compared it and thought about it in relation to this change management, what does it take to adopt and learn your product? Now, if you're using Salesforce, well, that's probably a long and steady trek because you're always learning Salesforce.
You're always learning,
right? So like what is, and maybe that's why they're even called trailblazers, right? But anyway, so if you think about that, you might think about what kinds of ways do I need to engage my customers, and that sort of thing. Was there anything else you wanted to mention on the slide, or anybody else have questions?
And I would add to you, Jan, I think thinking about this in the different phases of your customer journey, the onboarding phase, the adoption phase, because you are managing through change in all of those cycles. Like what does it require in the advocacy phase, if you're trying to build advocates, or the expansion and the upsell? All of these are processes where you're managing through change. And in some of them, they might be really quick and easy pebbles, and some of them that you might be building long-term stakeholder support to be able to build particular processes in your customer journey.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so change agent characteristics.
So when we think about, Jim, where this came from, I came across an article from, I think NetMind is the source of the article. It comes from a couple of years ago, I think dated back to 2018, but we're always working with our CSMs to help them develop different skill sets to manage through different processes, both externally and internally. And this particular article identified what are the right characteristics for being a change agent. Sometimes you're functioning as a connector. How many times have people here in your CSM work, you've been introducing somebody in your customer base to somebody else they work with? right? Like you're helping them break down silos in their internal organization. You're making connections between different teams. Is that something that you're experiencing? You might be serving as an influencer as you're building across change management in the work, or a propagator. You're creating more change agents to help you move the needle. Facilitating is something that we might be doing as well. A challenger. We were working with a particular partner who's seen a lot of movement in their adoption this particular cycle, but there were some areas where we still had some work to do. And one of my CSMs aptly said to them, like, this is good, but it can be better. So we're going to lay out a challenge for the next cycle that we go in to really help to facilitate more change. Sometimes, especially for those of you that are working in startups, you're experimenting, you're testing some ideas out, right? You're fiddling, you're iterating, and you're trying to figure out what is the right answer to be able to serve the adoption process. You might be
and you know, I love iteration. I talk about iteration all the time.
Yeah, we're constantly trying to get better. And so it's like, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good, and start somewhere. Maybe you're laying out a big vision for the group, or sometimes you have to roll up your sleeves and get in there with your partner or your customer and be a equal player. And so I think this works both externally with your customers, but we often find ourselves as CSMs, especially if we're trying to help create a seat at the table for customer success and really help our internal organizations understand that customer success is the work of everybody. These hats that I know Jan talked about hats and shoes last week. You know, we wear a lot of shoes, we wear a lot of different hats. These are all different skill sets that CSMs definitely dive into. I'd love to hear in the work that you all do, what of these change agent characteristics resonate most with your work, using the chat.
So yeah, anybody have thoughts or questions about this right now too? Is it inspiring anybody to speak up as others are writing in the
a lot of facility roles?
Yeah.
Little of everything. Challenger. I love that, Erica.
Ellie, I hope you don't mind. I'm not calling you out. I'm calling you up. But I know you've been through a lot of different change, and I'm just sort of curious if any of this is resonating so far.
It's definitely resonating. I was kind of looking at the slide here to see if there's been one that's been kind of more successful for me than others. I think the answer is it depends on who you're talking to and if it's internal or external, and yeah, just what their style is like too. I think one of the really important things is I think especially being customer facing, all of us have typically some pretty unique abilities to adapt our style to what other people need. And I think it's something to consider when we're thinking about change and building a thoughtful and proactive change process, whether that's something internally or something externally for customers, and thinking about who needs to go through that change with us and what they're going to need to be successful in that and how we can support them. And then we adapt in order to make that happen.
Yeah. And sometimes we play some of these different roles, and sometimes the persona of the folks that we're working with at our customer organizations, or if we're working on internal change, sometimes they are in some of these different roles. Right. And so thinking about that is kind of helpful as well.
I love how you said that, Jen, too. Like sometimes we have to find the facilitator in our customer base, right? Who's going to help us facilitate change internally throughout that organization, or we need to find the influencer.
Right.
I think equally as much as we want to wear these hats, we have to help try to identify some of these functions within the organization.
And sometimes if it's a large organization, we need a connector.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
That can be true internally or externally. Okay. So, oh, that's a great question, Kathy. Kathy Fava was just putting in the chat, what characteristics might be challenging for us as individuals? I love that, to put it on its head, not just what do we need to do, but is there something here that is challenging for you, right? When you think about these different types of roles, and, depends, sometimes if you are someone who isn't extrovert, but maybe more of an introvert. Maybe it's not something you think of being a connector, right? And, putting yourself out there, or sometimes, could be a variety of different things you can, that might be challenging. I don't know, Kathy, was there anything in particular that you were thinking of that is challenging? Did you want to say it out loud? You want me to read it? Because you're on mute.
Yeah, I couldn't get myself off mute. It's trying to tell me something. Now,
Thanks.
I've always had more difficulty envisioning kind of the big picture or where we're going, because I've always worked mostly with, the people with the ground level. It's a bad way to say it, but front lines, and not that much with management. So I didn't get a lot of practice thinking the way they think, and that's something I regret. So where is this all going? I don't know.
That's interesting. Yeah.
It's just that I haven't.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be good to have training for people that are, maybe in the same situation. Like, I don't know, how to think like a corner office person or something.
Absolutely. How to start thinking in that bigger picture way. And sometimes that comes from communication as well, helping to give people that why, and where are we going to, and why are we doing this change, right? And sometimes that helps everyone connect to that bigger picture and understand sort of that vision. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Sure. Do you have the links, or can you maybe share those again? We're going to go to our breakout groups. Awesome. All right. How did it go? Let's see. I'm going to see if I can find Keishla, and I'll pin you to the top again.
I'm here.
There you are. Yay. Awesome. So what kinds of things came up as you went out to the breakout rooms? Actually, maybe I'll pick on group one, because you came back sooner, and and Tara, I know you were taking the notes. What observations did you make as you're note taking for the group?
A lot of good discussion. I would say on the second topic around the interactions and meetings with other departments. One of the interesting things was to hear how that varies, and how that change management is also coordinated for a CSM versus a CS leader, and how that's a little bit different, coordinating with different departments and communicating that change and different ways that could work, and the different types of change management that might be needed depending on who you're working with and how often you're interacting with them as well.
Yeah, so a lot around internal. Did any other group talk about sort of internal change management? Or are you focused on working with the customer? Any of that resonate?
Our group talked about internal change management in the sense that we talked about our own change management, what we're going through in our careers, and how we deal with that. But I think it's also interesting that I don't know if it occurs to people, like, things are happening all the time, big things, little things, and to get into the mindset of a change management process in order to help you through it. You like the reactive thing, deal with it, not step back and think about, oh, this is a thing and I can make it into little bites. So it doesn't make it easier, but it manages it, I think.
Right. Yeah. The internal messages you give yourself may prepare you for change, right? And that'll be fun when we're talking about communication later, in a later session in July, specifically because of that, right? It's your internal messages, it's the messaging that you share with the group that you're working with. All of that can help prepare. Awesome. Kristen, I see you're here. That's awesome. Oh, sorry. Was someone going to speak, or I was going to call, is it, it's not call out, it's call up, I think, as somebody was saying. Anyway. But we teach change management. I know you're reading Wired to Resist. What kinds of things came up for you today?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, we were talking about in our group those four types of journeys, and it was really getting me to think about, for our organization, a consulting firm, we have two scenarios, and they're really kind of two different journeys. I think we have simpler ones where it's sort of that long change management process, but it's lower intensity, right? So, it's training, or it's taking somebody through a journey, and there will be some change that they have to put in place over time with that, but the intensity is not that high. And then we have other clients, and I know you've experienced these, Jan, where, it's like plopping customer success into the middle of an existing organization that's never had it before. And that is that climb the big mountain and trek over it to the far, far other side. And so, I think in thinking about this, for the customers we work with, I think it's interesting to think about it for our customers, but it's also interesting to think about it for our own business too, and that we have some different journeys for different kinds of customers. And I think that's probably true for most organizations here too. I don't know if anybody else ran into that as they were talking.
I'll say for myself, I know that when I've gone in and been like interim VP of CS at some of these startups, I would try to also change and, their organization at the same time. And then you kind of keep in touch with folks, and you realize like, oh, so that stuck. This part didn't,
Yeah.
and you think about that, like, it's different if you're a consultant, you're sort of drive-by changing. When you're in an organization, you're there for the long haul, but it can still be a long haul. Maybe it is, when you're doing organizational change, it's that low, steady one that you have to really stick with, right? And stay with it.
Yeah, I have to say, from reading the book, or I've been listening to it, and got through it finally last week. And I think what it sort of challenged me to do is think about how can we help our consulting clients prepare for and tackle that change that will inevitably be a part of what we do. I mean, we do teach classes on it, but I mean, when you're in the middle of a major change, you need more than just a class. So I've been thinking about that a lot.
Cool. Group 2, I see Marianne, Christine, Erica, Jade, Alfred, Fatima. Any thoughts as you were going through the discussion?
We talked a bunch about the different change agent characteristics and which ones resonated with each of us. And we talked about how we are all the different characteristics at different times, like when it is necessary to be the facilitator or the connector or whatever, and how we all wear those different hats, and which hat we prefer to wear and which ones we think are most beneficial in certain scenarios and things. We had a wonderful conversation in group 2.
Nice. Anybody else talk about kind of those roles that come up? Keishla, you thought of putting that slide in. What were you thinking about when you put that slide in?
I think it was just really more about the skills. Like, every problem has a different set of skills to help you manage to it and through it. And so oftentimes I've had situations with CSMs, and they will, like, I did this thing and I don't know why that didn't work, right? I don't know why I wasn't successful, because I'm always successful in this. And when you really break down the situation, it's like, well, yeah, it's because you were, flexing this muscle instead of that muscle. And so when you think about all the things that we need to do, and You know, as you said, Mary Ann, like we're doing all of them in any way, shape, or form, and all the time. And one of the things that I'm trying to be more cognizant of is being, I'm a former educator. And so if anybody is a former educator in the room, like your first 1 to 2, 3 years of like your first year of teaching, you're like, I don't know what that was. Like you just get through it. Year 2, you're like, oh. Year 3 is what I feel like when you start to teach on purpose. And so I think when you start to do customer success on purpose, it requires you to be more thoughtful about the skill that you're bringing to the situation. I had a lot of great classes and a lot of great lessons. But when I did a lesson on purpose and when I was doing something with intention, the outcomes were totally different. And so trying to understand the characteristics and the skills are a really important part of what I think that we need to figure out.
Yeah. And I see over in the chat, active listening too was something that came up. Is that what you were thinking about in your group, or when you were just hearing Keishla speak, Felicia?
Sorry. I was thinking about that just like when she was speaking, but also from the perspective of like, you know, yes, we can wear a lot of hats and there's change, right? That's always happening and we're part of that. But when we're trying to support someone else through change management, like we first have to understand, you know, what are they working with? What do they know? How do they understand what's happening and what's important to them before we can, you know, help them through a change or transition? So I was thinking about this from like, you know, here's a new software program. We know it's great. You're going to get great results with it. It's exactly what you wanted. But it's like, how do I find the time when we're talking about educators to incorporate this? How do I find the time to first learn it so that I know what I'm doing? How do I navigate this? How do I incorporate it in my day with 10 other programs? I have 18 kids. I need to get them on board. You know, there's so much that's going on. If I don't ask questions and have some understanding of what that person is experiencing and how they deal with what they're doing on a regular basis and change, then I'm not really going to be effective, because it doesn't matter what my features or benefits are. It just may not fit in. So I'm always asking questions and I always want to know what works for you. And like Keishla was saying, like as an educator, I know in year 3, I was kind of like, you knew where you were in that sweet spot. Well, we need to ask people if they know where they are when it's sweet, and then what disrupts that. And when that disruption happens, where do you go? Like, are you, you know, fear? Is that a flighting moment? Or are you just there to fight, you know? And I think that we just have to understand that some people are like, I'm right here for the long haul. And some people are like, oh no, I'm getting out of here. This is too overwhelming. So,
yeah, great. Yeah, no, absolutely. Love that. You really need to kind of do that active listening, like you were saying, to understand that. Let's finish up with group 5. I don't think we've heard from anybody there yet. Garner, Courtney, Andrea, I think you're all still here.
I'll pop in. So Andrea, I think it's Andrea. I don't know if it's Andrea or Andrea.
Okay,
Andrea was talking about wanting to create a CSM playbook, but specifically, I think about change management. So that's kind of interesting. She was thinking, how am I going to organize this? Could I use the connector, facilitator? And so that kind of dovetails with what Keishla was saying about once you're a seasoned CSM, which I'm not, I'm a career transitioner.
Awesome.
But once you're a seasoned CSM, like now you're deliberately pulling X tool from the toolbox because you're like, oh, this would be the best way to affect change or to help the client or customer with change management within their organization. So I thought that was kind of interesting. She's still kind of figuring out how she wants to organize the playbook.
That's great.
Love that. You know, all the CSMs can have best practices.
Cool. Well, we've gone a few minutes over, but I'm glad we were able to hear from most of the groups here. And I really just appreciate you exploring change management for a few sessions with us. I'm really excited about next week. We're going to be, we have somebody who's going to help us through. We're going to be meeting an hour early, and we're going to be talking through a change management sort of best practices process in helping the customer facilitate change management within their organization and getting them prepared for that journey. So we're going to go through sort of an example of that, and then sort of do some breakout groups around that. And then the one after that is change management within an organization, like when new people come in at the top, and all of that change that trickles down and can be quite disruptive. So yeah, and then Divya, we can certainly get you links if you just join the LinkedIn group. Marianne, do you have the LinkedIn group? Let's
I'll send
be
it
sure
to her.
put that. Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
be sure
I'll
to
send
put
it.
that
No
in
worries.
there. Great.
Looking for it.
Thank you so much.
And
You're welcome.
thank you so much, everybody. Keishla, thank you so much for inspiring it all and for bringing so much to our conversation today.
Thanks. Great to see you all. Great to see you. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank
Keishla.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Success Hour, formerly known as CS Office Hours. We regularly put out new content, so to be the first to know, like this episode, tap that notification bell, hit that subscribe button, and we look forward to seeing you soon.